from the digital world to your world. It's the Kevin Gill Show, your PMA Power Hour. Ladies and gentlemen, history is being made. StocktonCon presents the first live Kevin Gill Show. Put your hands together and make some noise for your host with the most, KG, Kevin Gill.
It's an honor to be here at StocktonCon today, and it's an even bigger honor because of who our very special guest is today. We've had a lot of great guests in the history of the Kevin Gill Show, and without further ado, I want to bring out a man who is a WWE Hall of Famer. He is a family man. He is the master of the 2x4. Tough guy. Please welcome and give a warm Stockton round of applause for Hacksaw, Jim Duggan.
Well, you know what we gotta do, guys. You know what we gotta do. Let's go, Kevin. Hello!
That's what's up. Hacksaw Jim Duggan's got a live microphone. Anything can happen.
Hello, Mr. Microphone.
Now, Jim, it's an honor to have you here on the show at StocktonCon. Many people, of course, are familiar with your world-famous exploits and adventures. But I want to bring you back to your early days, man. You grew up the son of a sheriff in Glens Falls, New York. What was life like for the young Hacksaw?
Well, actually, it was chief of police of Glens Falls, New York. And growing up in Glens Falls was a small town north of Albany, up by Saratoga, Lake George, and the Adirondack Mountains. It was a beautiful place. I compare it to growing up in Mayberry. I said I had a great family life. And you know, in wrestling, you hear all these stories of guys coming up, you know, with no parents, a rough life. You know, I have three loving older sisters. My mom and dad were the best I could ever ask. My dad was my best man at my wedding 25 years ago, and Jake Roberts was my head usher. So it was good to see Jake, but growing up in Glens Falls was a great experience.
Great place to live. I myself, a fellow East Coaster, just down the road a bit there in Queens, New York. But, you know, I know that sports was a huge part of your life growing up. You were a multi-sport athlete. Were you ever a big music fan growing up?
You know, actually, I wasn't too much of a music guy. Sports consumed me. I had 10 varsity letters in high school. I won the New York State Wrestling Championship my senior year. My shot put record from 41 years ago still stands today.
Wow.
And what a bunch of wusses up there! And football was my main sport. And I was lucky enough to be highly recruited by Woody Hayes at Ohio State, Joe Paterno at Penn State, many different universities. But I ended up playing my college ball for Southern Methodist in Dallas, Texas. And on a freak accident, I met Fritz von Erich, and that opened up the door for wrestling.
Now, you know, the theme of the show here is PMA. It's positive mental attitude. There you are. You've spent your whole life at that point, all 17, 18 years of it, focusing on sports. You quickly get signed, if I'm not mistaken, to the Atlanta Falcons. Mm-hmm. And then it wasn't that long of a time before then you were unsigned. And I'm curious how it felt then, where you put your whole life to the goal, you get your foot in the door, your toe in the water, and then back home again.
Well, actually, my rookie year, I was injured, and I was on injured reserve. I had 2 knee surgeries in the same year, you know, full leg cast and all that. But my second year, I came back, and of course, football had been my whole life. I had short hair and clean shaven, you know, and I was as straight as I come. I didn't drink, I didn't smoke. I played football, and I had my girlfriend, Tina Hopkins, wherever Tina is. But so when I went back and they did cut me, you know, it was a devastating experience. And my whole life, I'd been a good football player. What I expected to do pretty much my whole adult life had something to do with football, and have the coach call you in and say, that's it, you're gone. I was in Greenville, South Carolina at Furman University. They had a traffic circle. And I drove around. I didn't know if I should go back to Glens Falls, where my home, or go back to Atlanta, where I lived for a year, or go back to Dallas. And on about the 18th circle, I made the west turn and went to Dallas and gave Fritz a call.
And now Fritz von Erich, of course, the legendary patriarch of the Von Erich wrestling dynasty. What were your experiences like dealing with Fritz, and what was it like acclimating to Texas life, being a New York guy?
Well, I enjoyed Texas. I had a great time in Dallas. It was a nice city. And, of course, I didn't understand wrestling. I didn't watch wrestling as a kid. I wasn't a wrestling fan. And I didn't realize what a huge favor Fritz von Erich was doing, opening up the door for me. Back then, wrestling was very closed. The kayfabe was very strong. Heels and baby faces could not socialize together. It was a whole different business. It wasn't sports entertainment back then. They had a waiver. If you wanted to try one of the wrestlers, you signed a waiver and come up in the ring. And of course, they have Dr. Death stretch the guy to pieces. But
right, untrained guy versus Steve Williams.
Steve Williams.
Who's your money on?
That'll work. But yeah, I had a good time. And of course, I wrestled as Big Jim Duggan. I had short hair and clean shaven, and I wore a long gold bathrobe to the ring. And I went up to visit my dad in the WWWF. Vince McMahon Sr. was running the show. When I went down, Arnie Skolin liked me, and they started using me, doing jobs for Ken Patera and Angelo Mosca, Sergeant Slaughter. The first thing I ever had to do was try to get out of the Cobra Clutch. That was a big night for me, you know. And they put the chair in the middle of the ring, and I tried to get out. So finally, McMahon and Arnie Skolin called me in. They said, "Kid, you might have a future, but come up with something better than Big Jim and get rid of that gold bathrobe."
Now, I know another guy that played a big part in your career is the patriarch of the Samoan dynasty, the High Chief Peter Maivia.
Peter Maivia.
What were your interactions like with Peter Maivia? How did that whole experience start?
That was great. Well, actually where they sent me, because back then there was the territory system. There was a dozen territories around the country, and of course one of the territories was Hawaii. And I'm a young straight kid, and they're like, "Well, we're going to send you off to learn how to wrestle." I'm like, "Okay, you're going to Hawaii." Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, but we were making about $40 a week. You know, my mom, God bless her, would send us care packages with crackers and peanut butter. You know, kept us in. But I met one of my best friends in my life, Haku Ming. Known him for 35 years now. And it was a fun experience. And of course, the High Chief. And the deal was, all the guys would work for Japan. WWF would send their guys to Japan, and on the way back, they would come and stop and work for Maivia. So I actually got an opportunity to wrestle Andre as a real young. He really beat the devil out of me back then, because I was the convict then. I wore a mask with little C's on my hood. I had the mask on. I'm like, well, I'll spice this up. I put C's on my hood for the convict, right? And the fans were like, "Why'd you put those ears on your mask?" I said, "They're not ears, they're C's for the convict." But and the Samoans would come every once in a while. They'd come through and they'd take us out and buy us a steak, because we were eating Chinese buffet every day. But it was a good time. We were a bunch of young guys, and it was a fun time in the business.
Yeah, and any time your territory involves essentially living and frolicking on a beach on all your off days in paradise,
right, yeah.
That's a little bit of the upside. Now, I know from there you went on to spend time in a territory that was very revolutionary territory in terms of talent and TV production and all that, and that was the Mid-South UWF. One match I wanted to bring to your attention from that era, and I think I'll just start it and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You are often associated with what some say is the greatest gimmick match or the greatest stipulation match in wrestling history. Can you tell the folks a little more about that match?
Well, it was against Ted DiBiase, who I've wrestled Ted thousands of times all over the world, and Ted's one of the best there is. He's a second-generation wrestler. He grew up in wrestling. He understood wrestling. Where he tells a story at the Hall of Fame when they inducted me in the Hall of Fame. Teddy did the induction, and he's like, "The first time I tied up with Duggan, he cussed at me and tagged out." Because I didn't know what I was doing. I was ready to wrestle, though. And we still joke about it to that day. But yeah, he was the one to induct me. But anyway, it was loser leave town inside a steel cage with a coal miner's glove on top of a 12-foot steel pole, dressed in tuxedos.
Awesome. I remember as a young man turning on, I believe it was Tempo Television, and hearing the voice of Jim Ross calling the first time I got to see a tuxedo street fight. Even that in its own, I guess, was part of the buildup, where you then put the whole stew of stipulation matches in that one big payoff pot.
Well, Teddy, you know, they started off with the best dressed man contest, and of course Ted is one of those dapper guys. He's like Flair, you know, everything's creased. He looks good, always just right. You know, I'm in sweats. You know, I got my tie this way, but of course the fans, they cheered for me, and Teddy went out and broke my windshield out of my car back then, and it led. They followed the pattern all the way up to the big blow-off, Or I beat DiBiase and he dragged his freight. But actually, no, I did go from, when I came back from Hawaii, I went back to New York, still didn't know what I was doing. They sent me to Georgia Championship Wrestling, where I was still big Jim Duggan. Met my other best friend, Terry Gordy from the Freebirds, God bless him. We were best buddies. And then I went to Pensacola, and then from Pensacola to San Antonio. And when I made the move to San Antonio, that's where I became Hacksaw. I was working with Bruiser Brody, and the whole characters came together. And that's where the 2x4 came from, because we're out in West Texas. You know, you're just trying to get back and forth through the ring. And back then, the people hated me, you know. And they were punching at me and spitting at me and kicking at me. So I'm sitting in the back of the dressing room all beat up with big globs of spit laying on me. And Brody comes in, he goes, Duggan, he says, if you carry something to the ring, carry something you can use. Forget those feathered boas and sequin robes. And I'm like, well, here's a piece of wood. I came out yelling at that piece of wood, and the people scattered like it was a Red Sea. And I got back and forth to the ring. I'm like, this comes in handy.
Yeah, it's like an all-access pass. Now, speaking of, you know, that's when people, you know, were spitting at you and throwing punches at you when you were a hated bad guy, and you had an incredible run as a heel. But you went on to become obviously one of the most popular wrestlers in UWF, and then beyond that in WWF. What's your preference as far as being cheered or being despised by the audience?
No, I enjoy being a good guy. I really do. And I think the best characters are just an extension of your personality. You know, the guys that you know, Macho Man was Macho Man. You know, the $1 Million Man is in there with Teddy, and of course, there's a lot of Jake and Jake the Snake. But I kind of lost my train of thought talking about Jake.
Yeah, no, it happens, man. Just talking about being a heel or being a face.
Being the heel, yeah. And but when I was with me and DiBiase and Matt Bourne were a tag team called the Rat Pack, and Teddy hooked up with Skandar Akbar.
Sure. And
I wasn't going to go against America, so then that's when I started carrying the flag. So I had the flag and the 2x4 when I did come up to the WWF. And actually, you know, which is good, because if you come up and you own your character, then you can still, like, I can still be Hacksaw Jim Duggan, because that's my character. But if Vince McMahon creates your character, then he owns that. Like Big Boss Man was Vince's creation. Ray went to WCW, he had to be Big Bubba Rogers. Beefcake's the same thing. When he left the territory, he had to be someone else.
Had to become Zodiac.
Yeah.
Among other things. But now, Jim, talking about your WWE run, we talked about you being one of the most popular guys there, one of the most beloved guys. But you weren't someone who was known as being a multi-time world champion or something. And there's an old saying in wrestling that goes, the belts are often reserved for the people that need them to connect with the audience. What's your feeling on it?
Well, yeah, I never was a belt guy, and it was that way I could work with anybody. I could work with a world champion, and he can not hurt me, because he could beat me 1, 2, 3, and I get up, I hit him with a 2x4, I hit the referee with a 2x4, I chase the timekeeper around, I didn't up in the ring, oh, USA, so it didn't matter if I won or lost, man, you know.
Right, as long as they remember you.
That's the deal. I don't care if I win the match, long as I win the fight, tough guy.
It's a good philosophy. A lot of people remember your confrontation with Andre the Giant when you were early on your WWF run, and just what a strong moment that was, because everyone was always afraid of Andre, and you were right there in his face. Everyone has their legendary stories and anecdotes of working with Andre. What are your memories of the boss?
Well, you know, I actually had a good rapport with him. He knew me as a young kid coming back years ago through Hawaii. And I was actually the only guy ever to knock Andre the Giant out. You know, he was in the ring, and he goes, I challenge anybody. And, of course, if there's a giant in the business, they're like, Duggan. I wrestle every big guy there is, I'll tell you. So I got my 2x4, and then I got my chin on his belly, like, I'm not afraid of you. And when he went to grab me, his thumb hit me in the lip and just about tore my lip off. My lip just came down. But blood is just cascading down my chest now, and he's got me by the throat, and he's choking me down, I feel around on the floor, boom, I get my 2x4, boom, I hit the Giant with a 2x4, it goes down like a huge redwood, so we go off the air, standing over Andre the Giant, covered in blood, oh! So that elevated me from a mid-card guy to a main event guy.
No, it sure did in a big way. You know, a lot of people remember the famous moment, July 4th, New York City, the USS Intrepid Lex Luger becoming the first man to body slam Yokozuna. However, wrestling historians know that not to be true, as you had an epic series of clashes with Yokozuna prior to that.
Yeah, well, I don't think I've ever slammed him. I knocked him off his feet, so that was a big deal for Lex. And that, of course, I was getting ready to leave to go to WCW because Ted Turner revolutionized the business. He offered contracts, which, nowadays are very common. But back in the day, if you wrestled, you got paid. If you didn't wrestle, you didn't get paid. So Ted Turner said, hey, you guys come down here. We'll give you no-cut contracts. So it was abandoned ship. Hogan left, I left, Macho left, Brett eventually left, the Nasties.
Sure.
But shows what a master he is, because we went down there and we bumped Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Stunning Steve Austin, Sable. They all went up there. He repackaged them, and after a few years, they put WCW out of business. But that's my old joke. I said, I beat Stunning Steve Austin so bad, he had to shave his head and change his name.
Well,
I should be getting kickback all the bread he's making,
And that's the truth. I remember there was a match where you squashed Steve Austin in 35 seconds, and it was in your WCW debut. Did you see anything in Austin at that time as the future icon?
No, actually, I don't really get along that well with Steve. That's the old misconception. People say, well, you guys are all good friends, aren't you? I said, yeah, we all compete for the same money. We're real good friends. It's a business, and I tell the young guys, there's 1,500 NFL football players. There's 1,000 NBA basketball players this year. There's 120 WWE wrestlers. It's a very, very competitive business. It's just not kids from North America. You got kids
Right.
from Europe, Japan, Australia, all over the world coming after my job.
Now, you talk about not everyone always getting along. You had a kind of a public beef with Mr. USA and foot enthusiast Tony Atlas. That you guys were able to kind of come together and put aside some of your differences on Legends House. Do you think maybe if there's a seasons 2 of Legends House, yourself and Austin might do some LARPing or do some other sort of activities together?
That hard to say what they'll do if they do another one. But that Legend House is a lot of fun. We were 5 weeks in Palm Springs, California, at Harpo Marx's mansion. And it was great. Of course, I get there and they're like, well, you have to have a roommate. And I'm like, well, I haven't had a roommate since college, And they're like, and you're rooming with Piper. So the first 2 days was like, yeah, how you doing? We're just eyeballing each other. But then we headed off and we became best friends. It was like summer camp. Everybody else would be in bed, me and Piper would be in there giggling and stuff. And I could get away with anything. I'd blame it. One night, they didn't put it on the air. I threw all the pool furniture in the pool just to spice it up. Who could have done it, And it was, it was terrible because I'm out there, and you couldn't just, I had to set the pool furniture in piece by piece because I didn't want it to splash. And, of course, I see the flashlight come from the night watchman. I'm up against a tree. It's like Midnight Express. My heart's pounding. But he didn't catch me. There's so much stuff they didn't put in that show. And, of course, the next morning, Jimmy Hart's like, well, somebody put all the pool furniture in the pool. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think Piper was in bed last night. Oh, that Piper.
Yeah, Jimmy Hart just wakes up, opens a cans of beans, and is like, oh, my God, Jimmy.
Yeah, but Tony and I, we haven't got together or got along in, probably 25, 30 years. We just don't get along. And but we haven't ever had to live together.
Right.
And he had trouble with everybody. I can understand having trouble with me and Piper. We're kind of pain in the butt, too, But to have trouble with Hillbilly Jim, he's like a Buddhist monk.
Right. He's like the Harley Davidson
fine.
of Zen.
He cooks, he sings. He was Jim won me over. He was a really nice guy.
Yeah, and do you feel like Piper, did he make your whole experience that much better? Do you think?
Oh, yeah. It was. We had a lot of fun. I don't think they expected it to be a comedy, but it was like a comedy with me and Piper. Just the blender. That was a whole episode. Him trying to turn on that darn blender.
No juice for you, Hot Rod.
I said, just shake it real hard.
Now, of all the things you've done in your wrestling career, you've been there from the territory days to then, being among the first guys to have action figures, to be in video games, to have foam 2x4s sold. Did you ever think that as the snowball keeps rolling down the hill that you would add reality television show star to that list?
No, I don't think it, especially back in the day, I don't think anyone realized how big of a business it's become and how much offshoots there are, movies, reality shows. That's why I just did a golf tournament with the NFL guys, and I'm like, world champions? Where in the world have you guys been, you know? WWE goes all over the world. That's like my kind of tagline. I've wrestled in every state in the Union, every province in Canada, in 23 different countries. I mean, it's amazing the appeal of wrestling around the world. And actually, I'm going at the end of the month, I'm going to Denmark and Sweden, which I've never been to before, so it'll be 2 new places.
Adding 2 more to tick them off the list.
Of course, the ho, it sounds the same in Japanese or German.
Yeah, it translates to all languages. Now, I was curious, Jim. I just got back from the gathering of the Juggalos last week, and I know that among all the crazy places you've been and seen, that you've wrestled on more than one occasion at the gathering of the Juggalos. What do you have any memories or experiences?
Yeah, actually, I got a couple with them. But the first one was, it's hard to find a first after 35 years in wrestling, but I had a first with the Juggalos. I was in the ring as the sun was coming up over the trees. And I'm like, this is pretty wild. It was about 6:20 in the morning. We're having a wrestling match that's been going on all night. You know, but we're getting ready to leave. I'm driving. I got Greg the Hammer Valentine in the back seat, Tito Santana, and Beefcake is sitting next to me. So, of course, the Juggalos, they have a huge roadblock at the end of the road, you know. And, of course, we pull up. The cop looks in the window. He goes, "What's this, Back to the Future?"
I mean, had you ever seen an audience like that? I mean, is it surprising to you?
It's a different crowd. I had a flashlight match, which was something new. Everybody, they had no lights in the ring. They just all the folks shine flashlights into the ring.
This gentleman was there over here in the purple
right, cool,
shirt.
brother. Yeah. And so I forget who I was wrestling. And he's like, well, we'll do this, we'll do that. I said, we ain't gonna do none of that, brother. Standing in the corner and choked me.
Well, one of my favorite memories of that show is Kamala came out to the ring to wrestle. And like they said, all the lights are off and everyone just has flashlights and stuff pointing at the ring for the light until the sun comes up. And Kamala calls over the ref, and then the ref gets the ring announcer, and then Violent J makes the announcement like, due to Kamala's vision, the lights will be turned up just a little bit. So they brought up a little light because Kamala couldn't see anything. And that was the famous night that Kamala, possibly under the influence of inhaled marijuana vapors, went wild and sang an old-time Southern jam for the largely hip-hop loving crowd. And he was over like Grover, Jim Duggan.
Yeah, he actually, actually Kamala sings a lot. Big James Harris, he's lost both his legs to diabetes. Just saw him at New Orleans there for WrestleMania. He was down for the Mid-South convention. But yeah, he's a gospel singer. He's got a great voice, yeah.
Now, one of the great names you worked with in your original WWE run was Shawn Michaels, a guy who many say is, many people consider him on this great list. I was curious, where does he rank? You've worked with everyone on the planet, Jim. Where does Shawn Michaels fit in on your?
Yeah, I think Shawn's one of the best wrestlers that there is. He's very good. You know, his ego might have trouble getting in this room, but he's one of the best wrestlers. Now, I think that was back in the day. I'm not around him that much. Everybody said his attitude has changed and he's a different guy, but. For me, it's just one of the guys I didn't click with. I didn't get along with him. I didn't get along with Triple H. Way to pick your friends, Duggan.
Right. Yeah, I think at the
Doc and Gordy are dead, right?
But at the end of the day, I feel like people still have to wake up and look at themselves in the mirror, and it's much better to go through life being a sincere, nice person than being a fucking
actually, like I said,
egomaniac.
I think Shawn has changed. And Ted changed his life. He's a minister now. He's a reborn Christian. A lot of guys have done that. Yeah. Actually, I just did Duck Dynasty recently, and I don't know if you guys saw it. They're there, and it's like Phil's talking to me. He goes, "Well, Jim, have you ever been baptized?" I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "I was baptized as a baby. I'm Catholic." He goes, "That doesn't count." I said, "We're going to have to baptize you again." I'm like, "Well, that'd have to be another episode, Phil."
We talk a lot about the power of positive thought on the Kevin Gill Show and using positive thought and positive mental attitude when dealing with roadblocks and obstacles. We talked about you getting hurt your rookie year in the NFL and then moving forward and becoming a worldwide wrestling superstar. You made revelations on Legends House regarding incidences that have occurred in your personal life, but you still kept moving forward. How in those dark times, like what inspired you? What did you draw upon to keep moving forward when some people wouldn't be able to get out of bed in the morning?
I give you know, if there's any credit to give, everybody has to survive. Everybody has to get through stuff. But, you know, my dad was my role model, my hero. I think his lifestyle and thoughts came through me. But, you know, and I'm also a cancer survivor. That's a bad joke. You know, the doc, Steve Williams is gone, Terry Gordy's gone. I'm a cancer survivor. We put a lot of stuff in our bodies back in the day. And, but, you know, you just got to just keep on going, right?
Right, absolutely. Yeah. If you dwell on it, then you're going to remain where you are. But it's just amazing to think of. A lot of people can't get past, you know, when they don't get a good seat at the
hard.
movies.
It's not easy, that's for sure, right? I mean,
no, it's unbelievable, man.
You know, I went into the doctor's office, and, you know, I'm flirting with the nurse, and I'm having a joke with the doctor, you know, and he goes, Jim, it's cancer. I mean, it was devastating. I fell back in the chair. I was 45 years old. My daughters were, 2 and 4 or something. They were young. I was terrified. I spent the week before my surgery in my daughter's rooms crying and praying. I said I wasn't really concerned about coming back to wrestling. I said I just didn't want my daughters to have to grow up without a dad. I just wanted to survive it.
And not only did you survive it, Jim, but you came back with a force. You're here today. You're lighting up the room like a 5,000-watt bulb right here at StocktonCon. Am I right?
Oh. Well, if you're going to make some noise, guys, give me a hand! Sounds like a library in here.
A world with Jim Duggan is the type of world that I want to live in. That's for sure, a 1,000,000% for sure, Jim. And, you know, we talked about your WWE days, and you're driving up and down those roads with your trusty 2x4, laying across the dashboard, possibly reclining in the passenger seat. I imagine that had to be a pretty sweet gig compared to carting around a kimono dragon or a bulldog or a python from state to state.
Like I said, Jake and I, we always traveled together. We were best friends back in the day. And I got pretty used to the snake. And people were like, well, it's not a poisonous snake. I said, it's a 100-pound snake with a mouth like that. It'll still bite your butt, you know. It doesn't have to be poisonous. But anyway, so it's in the car. We're driving somewhere in the south flying because we're late, you know, got a big rental Lincoln or something, and the snake gets out of the bag. So I'm driving, I look in the mirror, and there's this huge snake head over my shoulder. You know what I said. And I go sliding into this like a Stuckey's. Well, all the old timers are all in their rockers out there watching. Me and Jake jump out of the car. We open the back seat. We're fighting with this giant snake. Stuff it back in the bag and drive off. So, you know, to this day, these guys are going, you're not going to believe it. These guys had a giant snake in the back there.
You know, Jim, we talk about the politics in wrestling and stuff like that and how competitive it is for the spots. There's a lot of backstabbing and stuff in wrestling. But then there's one unfortunate incident in wrestling that takes like backstabbing to another level, so to speak. And it's a tragedy that occurred down in Puerto Rico involving one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, Bruiser Brody. And I know that Frank was a person who inspired you, and I'm just curious what your thoughts are on Bruiser Brody and to educate some of the newer generation as to who Bruiser Brody is and what he represented.
Yeah, Brody was probably the best big man ever in the business. He was 6'5", 6'6", about 315 and lean. I mean, he was a lean 315. He was a monster, especially back in the day, long hair, big beard. But a very intimidating guy, carried a chain around with him, but he wrestled in Puerto Rico and had a beef down there. Another wrestler had a knife and a towel and said, can I talk to you in the bathroom? And went in and stabbed him, and he actually bled to death before they got him to the deal. But yeah, I've never wrestled in Puerto Rico just because of the kind of honor of Brody. Had many opportunities to go down there. It's a great wrestling territory, but yeah, something that, you know, obviously, you know, the business is the business, but don't, you know, kill somebody over it.
Yeah, and not many people.
Well, I'll tell you a story talking because there's bad people. I don't know if anybody knows Matt Bourne.
Sure.
He was the original Doink. I had trouble with Matt 30 years ago, and it's bad to talk about the dead. Too bad. Matt Bourne was not a good person. Anyway, I beat him up twice back in the old days. So just recently, we're wrestling in White Plains at a convention in a wrestling tournament. So he's like, well, I'll hit you with a chair. I said, Matt, we don't need that. We'll just, bottom line, long story short, I'm down there selling on the all fours, and he tried to kick my head off. I got my hand up at the last minute, and he potatoed me and juiced my nose, and he follows it up and starts to light me up a little bit, you know, and put an egg. So now I get up on my feet and like, hey, wait a minute. And he bailed out and got a chair. I got my 2x4. So I said, we'll finish it in the dressing room. So I went down into the dressing room, And I'm waiting for him to come down, and long story short, he had already taken his bag and everything and put in his car. He went right from the ring, right out the fire exit, and he was going to kick my teeth out of my mouth
and run away.
Run away.
Now, and to be fair, to even paint a little backstory here, when Jim, you casually referenced when I beat up him a couple of times back in the day, he was pretty well known as a very tough guy, a very good fighter, and I think it's notable. I don't know if you mind speaking on it, but I remember there was one pivotal event where you beat him up rather justly, involving a young woman.
Yeah, you know, the three sisters. You don't put a hand on a woman. But that's what started the whole ball rolling, and it's just one of those things. Part of the business. Not going to get along with everybody. But in our business, it's a much more physical business. Fights are common. That's in the old days. You'd go out and you'd have trouble in a bar, and the guy'd punch you like, brother, not bad. Come here. And of course, that's the old joke. You're always a phony wrestler until you go to court. You go to court, you're a trained killer, baby.
Yeah.
It goes like this: 10, 20, 30,000.
It's that multiplier. Yeah. I like to say when people ask me, and again, I've been a referee. I commentate mostly. I'm not a wrestler. But the real secret of wrestling is that everything hurts. Like, that's the real secret.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It's a physical business.
Yeah. It certainly is. Now, Jim, on the lighter side, wrestling fans nowadays are irritated by the stupidity that comes out of Vince Russo through various media. You've had to work with the man. Did you have good experiences working with Vince Russo?
No, not at all. Yeah. Well, first off, the guy, when he's WCW and he makes himself world champion, maybe a little bit of an ego problem, I'm going to be the world champion. But anyway, he's the one they were trying to push me out of my contract back in the day, so I did the janitor gimmick, and then I made the janitor. It's like, well, you're going to have to clean Vince Russo's toilet with a toothbrush. I'm like, okay, great. Well, okay. So when it came time to do the vignette, I poured a Diet Coke in the toilet, and instead of doing this deal, I'm cleaning the toilet. Oh, cleaning the toilet. And made the spot work, And so they call me back up, and they're like, well, fly up to Atlanta. And of course, we're at the CNN Center, and Knobs, we'd be on the elevator, and Larry King would get on the elevator. Knobs goes, Larry, how your ratings? We're killing you, Larry.
Unbelievable, man. Yeah. I mean,
but that's when they made me they turned me heel to join Team Canada. But they were trying to push me out of my contract to free up some cash for some of the young guys. And bottom line, this is a business, this is the way I feed my family. And so, yeah, I went along with it, It was like being in the Titanic. You knew the ship was going under, but you wanted to stay because after, it went under, I was on contract for 7 months and got paid. So
yeah, isn't it unique?
Out.
Isn't it unique how wrestling?
My wife loved it. She goes, you look totally different. Short hair, clean shave. I'm like, wait a minute.
Do you think that Team Canada essentially needed a personality injection at that stage of the game?
Oh, well,
you bring a lot
Lance,
of...
yeah. Lance Storm is I don't know if the guys know Lance. Great wrestler, great technical wrestler, but back then he was as plain as a vanilla cup of ice cream. And he had the microphone, he goes, could I please have everyone's attention? And I'd be behind him, hey, shut your mouth! You want a piece of me? And so they call me back up, and they're like, Hacksaw, he wants you to tone your stuff down a little bit. I'm like, tone my stuff down, tell the kid to turn his stuff up, It's the big leagues.
And isn't that unique in wrestling where they have a talent, they sign the talent to a contract, at some point then they're like, oh, let's change things. How do we do it? Do we just work it out with the talent honorably? No, let's just try to embarrass him on TV, let's have him scrub toilets, they put Ric Flair in a mental institution. None of that stuff was designed to get the characters over, but a true performer can take chicken excrement and turn it into chicken a la king,
all you
to
need
turn
is
a phrase.
your TV time. If they don't put you on TV, then you have no control. But they put you on there. That's why I tell the young guys, you're going to get beat in 2 minutes. Do the best job of getting beat you can do in those 2 minutes, man.
And you talked about, Jim, longevity, and in the old days, it was a different mentality. It seemed like the wrestling companies would kind of hold it over the wrestler's head to keep their job, which helped everyone make every town because it's a rigorous schedule and stuff. What do you think about how things have changed where nowadays wrestlers who love wrestling more than anything have so much wear and tear on their bodies, like guys like CM Punk or whoever, that they decide, you know what, I'm gonna head out on my terms, take a little break. What do you, or take a retirement?
You know, these kids got it easy nowadays. They don't work at all. You know, I went 54 days straight without a day off. You know, Jake probably went over 100. Piper's over 100. You know, back then, if you don't work, you don't get paid. So, yeah, now the kids would work 3 days, 4 days, 3 days off. I mean, come on. But, you know, it's a different business. Everything evolves. Football evolves. You know, everybody says, well, you're missing out on all that big money the kids are making now. I said, well, guys playing football in the 80s aren't, you know, the kids are making more money playing ball. It's just, you know, part of the deal. Save your bread.
Absolutely, yeah. Saving your bread and investing your bread are probably the two wisest things we can do. Now we know there's a plethora of fans waiting to meet and greet and get signed 2x4s from Jim Duggan at his table over at StocktonCon. So we gotta move things along. Are there any? We have a question or two from the audience. In effect, anyone? If you don't have a question, that's fine. I see a gentleman.
Brother.
Come on over here, brother. Come a little closer. What do you got, sir? And let's keep it to one question, please.
Jim, I'm with Pro Championship Wrestling Work Farm. I have about 10 guys here from our training school. We spoke with you yesterday. Thank you again for your time. Any advice for guys just starting out that, I mean, is body the most important? Is promos the most important? What's the most important thing, or what do you think in regards to that?
Well, you know, it's funny now. It's different than any other endeavor. You know, if you're football and you run a 4.5 40 bench press 500 pounds, have a 36-inch vertical jump, you got a good chance of making it. In wrestling, there's no set formula what it takes to make it. So what I tell the young guys, first embrace a gimmick that works for you. Like I said, an extension of your personality. Like, no way I'm going to be handsome Jimmy Duggan, you know. So you gotta find something that works for you, and then just work on your promos like you do your ring work. But understand, it's a numbers game. There's a lot of great talent out there, and there's only 120 spots. So the main thing is keep doing what you're doing and hope somebody recognizes you, and you get that break. And then, you know, the big thing is being in the right place at the right time. But, yeah, chase your dream, guys, but always make sure you have something to fall back on, because remember, just the odds are against you. But, you know, who would have thought CM Punk would have turned into the star he had? Daniel Bryan. So it happens to guys, you know. So, yeah, never say never. I got a break, you know.
Yeah, sometimes it happens despite the best efforts of all involved. Well, everyone but the wrestler doesn't want it to work, but the wrestler transcends it. I think that's the magic of wrestling, that in those ways the audience can make someone, but the office can spend an inordinate amount of time trying to not let that happen.
Right. And there's other guys, they put a lot of gas on that just don't carry the ball.
Sure.
Teddy's kid's a good, one of the Spirit Squad. Kenny Dykstrom.
Sure.
They were pushing Kenny really strong for a while, and they just didn't seem to carry the ball, so they pulled the gas off them. Like I said, it's a tough business.
Do you see anybody, Jim, in the current WWE roster, in NXT, or in your work on the independents? Do you have your eye on anybody? Do you see anybody that's got that breakthrough potential?
Yeah, because there's so many guys out there that can do so much, you know. Of course, I don't watch a lot of WWE stuff. People say, you see what happened last Monday night? I'm like, no, that'd be like a butcher watching him cut meat on his day off. Last thing I want to watch is wrestling when I'm off. But, yeah, there's some good guys out there. I like Way Bryant. He looks like a throwback to the old days. I've been a big fan of Dolph Ziggler.
Sure.
I think, yeah. Dolph, who looks
Everyone
like a
loves Dolph
champion, you
Ziggler.
know, the white hair, a lot of teeth, handsome guy, good body, personable guy. He's kind of, you need that marquee guy. You need the John Cena, the Rock, the Hulk Hogan type character to be your marquee guy. You know, we're not all lead singers in the band, you know.
Someone's got to play the drums.
Yep, you ain't kidding, brother.
Do we have any other questions for Hacksaw Jim Duggan? What's up, homie? What you got?
Hi, Hacksaw.
Hi, brother.
I'm a wrestling manager.
Uh-huh.
And I know you worked with a lot of really great managers over the year. And I know the point is to not get heat on yourself, is to get heat for your client as by association. And I was wondering if you can give any advice on keeping promos fresh and just general how to get out there and sort of be a good manager without making it be me kind of thing.
Yeah, well, as we just said, you know, you're a supporting cast out there, brother. You're the manager. your guy's your main deal, usually, unless it's like Bobby Heenan or somebody like that. So yeah, you as the guy doing the job in the ring, you want to do the most to showcase your talent. You're not worried about getting yourself over, showcase your talent, and that in turn gets you over. And practice your interviews in the mirror. You look in the mirror and say, hey!
Yeah, right. Driving down the road is a great place to cut promos. The person in the car next to you might think you're crazy, but you might get a gem to drop on TV. Ain't that the truth? Any final questions for Hacksaw Jim Duggan? What is up, my friend? My man's got a Hatchet Man in a wheelchair tattoo on the side of his neck, which is pretty sweet. And almost like the modern equivalent of the fanny pack going on here.
Yeah. Well, not necessarily wrestling related, but more along the lines of Gathering of the Juggalo and everything. I don't know how much you dug the whole culture that we got going on, but I was curious if, well, one, you say you're not big on music, so I'm guessing you probably haven't heard the song Juggalo Island.
No, I don't.
But it's pretty sweet. Basically, the idea is just to have an island all for juggalos to camp out on. And basically, I was wondering if that comes to fruition, would you gladly be one of our first, celebrities, anybody to come and visit? Because we would love to have you.
Sure, yeah. Always open for a booking, brother. Yeah, you're not kidding. Yeah, but
An invitation to a private island. He could then have wrestled in every province in Canada, all 50 states, 47 countries, and one Juggalo Island. I want to send some love out to Hacksaw Jim Duggan. He took some time out of his schedule today. Time, as Flava Flav taught us, is the greatest gift and the one thing you don't get back, brother. That's a shoot. It's been an honor to have a WWE Hall of Famer. It's an honor to bring the Kevin Gill Show live for the first time to y'all here in Stockton. Whoa, whoa. I want to thank StocktonCon for making this happen. And check out KevinGillShow.com for a whole list of great interviews. Please give it up. And how about a big ho? Thanks so much, Jim Duggan.
thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Hey, come meet Jim Duggan, come meet Shelly Martinez, Jake the Snake Roberts, Todd Bridges, all going down on that upper celebrity deck, brother. And and this guy named Mick Foley's gonna be here. That was my final question. Mick Foley always talks about people mistaking him for you. And even some celebrities have tweeted pictures of themselves chilling with Mick Foley, and then the caption says, "I can't believe I met Jim Duggan." What are your thoughts?
Well, if I was Mick, I'd be hot. I'm about 14 years older than the guy.
Thanks, Jim. We'll see you all in a bit. Much love.
The Kevin Gill Show is brought to you in part by DignifiedBastard.com. Dignified Bastard is the only place you can pick up the world-exclusive collector's edition of District 9's new EP, South Bronx Memoirs. Hard-hitting New York hardcore from the South Bronx. Also available digitally on iTunes, Amazon, and Google Music.
Hey now, this is Adam Harrington, voice of Bigby Wolf and the Woodsman in Telltale Games The Wolf Among Us, Andy St. John, Leland, and Jerry in The Walking Dead, the video game, and of course, Shaco, Rise, Karthus, Kassadin, and Mordekaiser, in League of Legends. If you know what's good for you, you'll rate and review The Kevin Gill Show on iTunes and Stitcher now. I strongly suggest you visit KevinGillShow.com for a complete library of episodes. Until next time, jabronis, keep that PMA.